But I wait 30 seconds until we're live, like after we're live, right? Because of the lag. I'll wait. Okay, hello everyone. Welcome back to the plenary. My name is Liz Wu, and I'm the special coordinator for the Young African Leaders Initiative. Thank you so much for joining today. I hope you had some great conversations looking at envisioning our vision for the next 10 years of YALI. It's been a great 10 so far, and there's so much more to come. The best is yet to come. And so we just had some among tracks, the business track, the engagement track, and the public management track, wherein we had a representative from the US government as well as an alumnus lead a conversation on developing that vision. So now we'd like to hear a readout from what was discussed in those sessions. And if I may, I'd like to start out with our civic engagement track. We have from Comoros, Kiki. She is a 2014 Mandela Washington Fellow and co-founder and president of Imara Comoros. And she is joined alongside Matthew Miller, who is the acting director of the Bureau's of African Affairs, Public Diplomacy, and Public Affairs Office. Also just came out of Senegal as the PAO there, so he has really in-depth experience with YALI. Kiki, I'd like to start with you. Can you tell us what you discussed in your session?
Sorry, I was muted. Thank you very much, Elizabeth. I think we'll start with Matt. Mike, why don't you start?
Well, thanks, Les. So we had a really great conversation, and we talked about, the next 10 years, some of our goals, advancing democracy, building economic empowerment, promoting peace and security, addressing health and environmental challenges, and most important, engaging the amazing African youth to be powers of change and factors.
Thank you, Matt. That sounds wonderful. Do you have anything to add?
And throughout all of those, my colleague here made a really great explain that concept a little bit.
Kiki, you're on mute.
You're on mute, Kiki.
Sorry. And I apologize. I lost you for the last few seconds, Matt. But
well, I just talked about how your concept of anti-fragility was important to all of the goals that we have for the continent and for YALI over the next 10 years.
You're here.
Yes. So thank you very much, Matt. So we did talk about anti-fragility and how important it is in all tracks, not just in civic leadership, because if we have learned anything from the pandemic and how things have been handled is that we are, like our economies are fragile, our health structures, our government. So we have, we're hoping that adding this dimension of going beyond resiliency and to anti-fragility, where you are not just recovering, but you're thriving, with the challenges, and each challenge that gets thrown at you, you take it as an opportunity to get better and to explore more opportunities. And this is something that's going to be so crucial in the next 10 years, and that in the civic leadership, but as well as other tracks, we have to make sure that it is included and that our leaders know what it is about and how to build those structures.
We also talked about some of the things that that we're going to need to do in order to engage that dynamic youth, and definitely strengthening the alumni networks, both within countries and across the continent. I think was really important. Kiki, why don't you talk about the very important concept you found from one of your colleagues about the benefit of those networking?
So yes, we did talk about the importance of reaching out to the alumni network, not just for YALI, but there are several other other networks that you can reach out to, especially in smaller countries where the cohorts might be a smaller sizes. So it is important to reach out and to build the connection and strengthen it through reaching out to the Humphrey programs, to the Fulbright programs, the Obama leaders, the YALI. So there are so many opportunities and so many people we can reach out to strengthen those networks. And we explored ways to harness all that main manpower and brain power.
We also talked about the importance of making sure that that we're reaching audiences outside of the capital cities, that we're getting the entire country involved in these sort of opportunities. So as we talked about possible workshops on the continent, let's look at ways that we can get outside of those capital cities, including engaging like grassroots NGOs that are outside of the capitals to host those events. Really the importance of not just being city-centric or capital-centric. Okay, did you have other thoughts?
Yes, another thing that we mentioned was the importance of learning from each other and learning different. We were talking about how different, we talked about democracy, education, and a lot of things, but how different the models are in every single country. But how important it is to know that your way is not necessarily the best way, the better way, but it is a different way. And the more different you know, the more different you see and experience and learn about, the better your different can be. So it is not about being the best or having the best structure. It's about learning different and sharing different.
We also had a couple of the members pose some really cool ideas. So one of them was, what kind of motto can we have for the next 10 years? And there were a couple that were really great. One of them that kind of touches on getting outside of the capital cities was expanding the YALI network to all the nooks and crannies of African states. And then another one that I think was really awesome was also hope for an Africa by Africans. And then we had another commenter say, if you could summarize YALI in one word, what would it be? And so I will give a couple, but then I want KK to give hers. Some included empowerment, opportunity, teamwork, determination, and then a very powerful one. KK, what was yours?
So mine was validation, because it was through YALI that I learned that my dreams were valid, my ideas were valid, and all those things. And so, yes, for me, YALI means validation.
I thought that one was just awesome. And so we also talked about some of the challenges and the ways that we can overcome those, making sure that we are communicating well between obviously our embassies who help facilitate a lot of these programs and opportunities, and our YALI alumni and network members. And so just making sure that we're having multiple ways that we can be in touch, whether it's WhatsApp, email, social media. And one of the challenges, as we've been very digital over the last year, just the cost of data and of that digital engagement is something that we want to try to find ways to overcome so that we can reach broader audiences. KK, what other takeaways did you have as well?
I like the idea that, because I was not aware of that, the idea that you mentioned about the American centers being in rural communities, because we, in my country, we don't. So I wasn't aware of that. And I think it's a wonderful thing. And it's also a wonderful thing to explore in every single country, in that vision of being inclusive and going in every nook and cranny.
No, I think that's great. We also talked about, yes, ways that we can use those spaces that are outside of the capital cities, the American spaces and centers, to further our reach. So Liz, I think that's where what we kind of came down on some of those great ideas, and look forward to hearing from everybody else.
Okay, thank you, Matt. So a few things that I heard out of that are, one, we want to get outside of the capital cities, expand our reach, which may include using American spaces, which are public spaces where people can go participate in U.S. Embassy funded programs, learn about the United States, or opportunities to study abroad there. Usually they're in universities or libraries and that kind of thing. And they are great, especially for places where it might be difficult to travel to, also for security reasons. I heard you talk about resilience, the resilience of YALI and how important that is. And I can tell you, I've seen that throughout this year under COVID. I've been sitting in my basement, and as YALI coordinator, it is like, it's just been a pure joy. People are miserable, I know, but to hear every day about all of the wonderful work that YALI alumni are doing to support their communities during this challenging time, whether it's feeding poor communities, developing apps to allow for greater communication, holding radio shows to raise awareness about safety, medical professionals out there treating people. The list goes on and on. YALI are out there and truly are not just the future of Africa, but Africa now. You are the ones leading. So I love that. I also heard you talk about learning from each other, which is key. Nobody knows how to do it best. And from that, I would say, I think P.Das Fitzsimmons mentioned yesterday, it's impossible to fail. That's one of her mottos, right? Because you try something, it doesn't work, that's a learning experience, right? It's important in leadership to be agile and not to get stuck in any particular way. So you might start out with one structure, then you tweak it. That's all a part of the process. So I really love that too. And youth in particular are good at being agile, right? As old people, we get stuck on our ways. But I know YALI can bring that agility to any situation. What else did I hear? Empowerment, validation. That's what YALI training is all about, right? Developing your leadership skills and finding ways to be our best selves, right? And you'll hear more about that. Actually, our winner from the competition talks about that in her poem. She's going to be reading it, so I hope that you stay tuned for that. All right, we have 20 minutes left, so I want to move to the next track. Our representative from the business and entrepreneurship track is Samir De Cruz Silva, and he is a regional leadership alumnus, a Mandela Washington Fellowship alumnus, Tony Umelo fellow as well, working in a business incubator in Cabo Verde. Over to you, Samir.
Thank you, Elise. First of all, congratulate my colleagues that talked before me. And just to go partnership, the first thing for Africa in the next 30 years, talking about business and entrepreneurship, and see that the participants in our session, one of the things we is that the vision must be aligned with the 20 agenda, the 7 aspirations and the goals. That vision is an integrated, prosperous, and peaceful Africa, driven by its own citizens, and of course in the international arena. And we joined an inclusive and sustainable development for us. And of course, to achieve this vision, we face some challenge, a lot of challenge, and of course the first is peace, security, justice, democracy, and good governance. But I'm not going to talk about this because I have here colleagues that we talk about this, and maybe the first challenge talking about business and entrepreneurship is the market unification, because Africa is the biggest market in the world. Africa, and even our population is young, and this is a very big opportunity to the country, to our entrepreneurs, to our businessmen, to take this opportunity of this big market and make things happen, and Africa into an inclusive and sustainable developed continent. And the unification of the market is a very big challenge because we are talking about connect the country. We need infrastructure. We need to invest in infrastructure, but also we can talk about the rules. Yeah, we talked about the African continental free trade area that was created in 2018, and this can be a very important tool to help this market unification. But another challenge is the digital transition. This COVID pandemic taught us a lot of things, and one of the things that COVID-19 taught us is that we need to accelerate the digital transition. And when we talk about business and we talk about this big market that we have in Africa, we need to take advantage of technology and all the technology we have, and make this digital transition in order to achieve this big market. But another challenge is with education, because unfortunately in most of the country in Africa, our education system is not adapted to give our young people all the skills they need. And here, I think we have young people very well prepared with good technical and professional skills. But when we talk about business, we have young people with good ideas, innovative ideas, developing interesting solutions for some specific problems we have in the continent. But the big issue is to transform this solution into feasible business model. And just to finish, because I don't have more time, to talk about YALI and this challenge. One of the most important things YALI brought to young entrepreneurs in Africa is the networking. YALI put it together dozens of young entrepreneurs, and talking about myself, I've been taking advantage this networking and trying to make what I'm doing locally a global. So
thank you, Samir. That was a really excellent readout, and you covered a lot of things. I heard talking about helping African businesses close the financial gap at early stages when it's riskiest, right, as an entrepreneur to start out. YALI Business Entrepreneurship Track should have annual meetings developed by the programming, so that touches on what you discussed around networking. And across the board, it doesn't matter which alumni I'm talking to, which track. I think everybody wants to see more networking, more opportunities to connect. And as we heard earlier, it's important not just to connect with YALI alumni, but also alumni from perhaps other programs as well, including Fulbright, International Visitor Leadership Program, USAID youth programs, etc. You talked about connecting with the diaspora, which is incredibly important as well. We had the return, and now we're, the year after the return. I think this is really important and something that we need to do more of, connecting with the diaspora. You talked about adapting education to create a more innovative mindset at an earlier age. I think we all could use that, here in the United States as well. But that is a very important element. And technology, increasing technology support as well. All right, let's go to our public management track folks. We have from USAID Senior Advisor Makani Toangara. Makani has over 14 years of international economic development and management experience. And then we have our alumnus, Henry Pacific Mayala from the Democratic Republic of the Congo. He's a 2017 Mandela Washington Fellow and a social scientist and researcher. Makani, can I turn it over to you to give a few tidbits of the feedback you got out of your session?
Sure. We had a really great session and a good conversation. One of the real challenges for folks in the public sector is continuing to push for transparency and accountability, and sort of the kind of citizenry engagement that leads governments to really work on behalf of their citizens, and be responsive in a democratic way. In order to, so that led to discussions around how to break out of silos, and for people who are involved in this work to be able to talk across different types of silos. So number one is a silo of, are the public management people in dialogue with the private sector, with the civil society folks, so that they're also talking together about the needs of each of their mutual needs, and how to build systems of accountability and transparency across those different sectors, and to be able to share solutions that are responsive, and don't lead to either lack of accountability or overregulation, or the types of challenges that can inhibit strong economic growth and good governance as well. We also talked about breaking out of silos, the power of the YALI network to promote dialogue across countries, that solutions that are being explored in one country, by promoting deliberate communication, people can share solutions and what pilots and what's worked and what's not worked, and inspire others to be in that dialogue as well. And I pointed out too that a lot of the accountability and transparency issues are global. This isn't just an African challenge. Here at home, we're trying to encourage people to go to their county council budget meetings and government budget meetings at the local level, because it's for the presence of citizens at each level of government that really pushes the priorities to align with the values of the citizens. And that's not an engagement that's always promoted, and that's difficult work and challenging work that folks on the ground in their communities on the front lines, like our YALI alumni, are in a position to push for and advocate. But getting strategies for how to do that effectively, not just from their fellow alumni, but from activists around the world, can help them to stay motivated and to get some fresh ideas and fresh tools for how to promote that. And that also connects to the diaspora point that Samir made, that diaspora engagement needs to also be a part of that conversation. It's not just a conversation amongst African leaders, young leaders. We also talked about what are the systems of accountability and transparency. There were some comments in the chat about the power of digital to spread, to be a part of those systems of accounting and transparency, and like, what do those tools look like? There's obviously a digital literacy gap on the continent. That's a part of that challenge as well. But there's an opportunity there again, but folks have to be in dialogue. The folks building those systems have to be in dialogue with folks in the public sector, and to try to come up with mutual solutions and innovations. I think the overriding sentiment was that there needs to be more innovation in the models of transparency and accountability, that the old models are only getting us so far, particularly for folks who are in countries where you have democratic rollback and you have more authoritarianism. It's much more difficult to speak out. It's important to dialogue around how people can get their message out when they're trying to do the right things under very, very difficult circumstances. So with that, I will hand it over to Henry.
Well, thank you, Makani, for that inclusive and accurate reporting. Mainly those were the points that we had during our conversation. Maybe if I may to mention a few points that I wish to emphasize on was the need for us, YALI current and future leaders of this continent to rethink of models which are to be contextualized and fit best to our reality. We already have the exposure to what has been working outside our situations, but there is a need for us to move beyond and think out of the box to adopt and come up with innovative methods and models which fit best our context. And this goes from businesses to democracy. How do we perceive democracy? How do we perceive accountability when it comes to public management? With this, we also mentioned about how there is need for us to operate from a coordinated approach instead of keeping a silo position. But and to finish, I would like to take on what my colleague KK had mentioned about the impact of YALI is the exact thing about validation, because we discuss a lot on our role, our duty as citizens to demand for accountability to people holding public offices, chairs. And the validation word actually just resonates on my mind in a sense that most of the time, as we've been discussing during our conversation, is that is democracy working for us? Is election more important than having food on the table? And yes, while these are nice, good tools for democracy advancement process, we need to situate ourselves in when we decide to validate whatever that happened. And here is my appeal to all of YALI alumni and colleagues across the continent. We should not feel the need to align. We should feel the need to validate what is right based on our context. Not because an elect president, through a rigged electoral process, has been congratulated by an American ambassador, makes it right. If we keep feeling it is not something to validate, then we got to keep our mind, our fight constant. And that is actually what has resonated to me with the validation. Most of us, it was a nice exposure. It was good to have your ideas shared, meet with the other people having same situation, or sharing the same fight with you. But the thing is, we should not keep on seeking the validation from elsewhere. The validation should come from within. The validation should come from the context, from how we understand it, from the Africa, from the village, from the country that we want to see 20 years ahead from now. Other than that, it was a very good discussion. And I thank you, Makani, for sharing your thoughts, and for all the people who attended the session.
Thank you so much to everyone here. I'll give everyone 1 minute if anyone has any last words before I wrap things up. Anything else to add? Okay. Henry, it looks like you're saying something, but you might be muted. We can't hear you. Nope, I can hear you now.
Okay, so I was saying that I started with a moment of silence for my people in the Democratic Republic of Congo. As you might know, we are facing environmental challenge with the volcanic eruption, which happened a few days back. The YALI alumni network in the DRC has launched several actions, including some fundraising to assist people who, once more time, due to poor planning, lack of proper public management policies, are facing dire misery. positive thoughts toward them, that will be nice. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. I'll just summarize the overall themes that I heard from everybody. One is, Makani, I really, really thank you for bringing up that intersectionality and the need to break down silos. Samir started out talking about needing to provide new businesses, right? New entrepreneurs with support, but that comes from policy, right? You need your public managers involved. And of course, civil society has a key role to play in holding governments accountable, ensuring that we have that transparency and accountability structures that you talked about. So we do need to all talk to each other and embrace that intersectionality. I heard a lot about networking amongst alumni, with the diaspora, within the countries, across the continent, and internationally. And that's really important as well, and something we can look to do more of in the next 10 years. Discussions around technology and digital literacy, which I think we're always going to need more of, certainly within the next 10 years as well. And both Henry and KK talked about sort of the need to rethink models and structures to be agile. There's no one-size-fits-all solution anywhere. What works in Comoros might not work in the DRC, or Cabo Verde, and vice versa, right? We can get the best practices, but we need to adapt them to our, local situations. And that validation piece is really important. I know we were talking about elections in the DRC. They were very controversial, but you are leaders, and I think YALI, I hope that the leadership program from YALI helps you build that confidence and validation that you were discussing. And with that, I thank you for this great conversation. I look forward to the next 10 years of YALI, and I can't wait to see you in the next session. Thank you.